Well, I'm happy to drink out of the well. At important occasions in my life, I like to go top shelf. If I'm a business owner going into a highly regulated industry, I think that's an important time in your life to also considering going top shelf. Welcome to Norris McLaughlin's Top Shelf Legal, a limited podcast series where we break down the hard stuff on beers, distilleries, breweries, and spirits. I'm your host, Ted Zeller, practice group leader of the liquor law group at Norris McLaughlin. In this episode of Top Shelf Legal, I'm going to discuss some of the things I like to do in negotiating distribution agreements. I've heard some folks say, distribution agreements are worthless. What's the point? It's all controlled by state law of the crazy world of beer franchise rights. That's where the state has basically made a monopoly for beer wholesalers to have the exclusive right to sell a brewer's beer in a specific territory. And they can't just terminate that agreement or put a term on it, meaning, okay, we'll try it for 1 year, and if I like you, we'll give you an extended 5-year, but then I can terminate you, in year 6 with impunity. That's not the way it works. The beer wholesalers will own those rights. So I have spent a lot of time developing and negotiating distribution agreements. I've done it for beer wholesalers, but I've done it more so for brewers. And at any point in time in my office, there'll be 3 or 4 distribution agreements on my desk. And I've negotiated them all around the United States, Ireland, the Caribbean, Mexico. Different countries have different laws on it. But all in all, beer franchise laws are very strong all around the United States. And where I'm sitting here in Pennsylvania, very strong beer franchise law. I was able to really negotiate and get past legislation that really created benefits for Pennsylvania brewers in the self-distribution world, meaning they're the ones who are the middle tier and even the retailer because they can sell at their own shops, basically marrying all 3 tiers together. As you've heard me say before, and a lot of people say, the 3-tier distribution of alcohol in the United States starts with the brewer who sells to the beer wholesaler who sells to the retailer. Well, when you're self-distributing as a Pennsylvania brewer, you can marry all those tiers. You can be your own wholesaler and you can also be your own retailer by selling at your brewery or in the 2 additional what are called storage locations. But there's going to come a point where if you're really scaling up, you're starting to become a packaging brewer. Think about some folks that started small and now are really big time, like the Cape Mays of the world, Victory, Trogs. They've been around for a couple hundred years, but Yingling, really, you start to get to that point. You have to have a sophisticated distribution agreement to protect your rights as best you can. And that's not always easy. The best time to negotiate the distribution agreement is when you are about ready to appoint a new wholesaler for a new territory. Maybe you're opening up a new state. Maybe you're adding additional territories. That's also a good time. But if you're dealing with a situation where you have a wholesaler that you've appointed, right? And this could have been someone you've developed this great partnership with about, what we see at the consolidation at the brewery level, the Miller Coors ABI merger, globally. Think about Anheuser-Busch and the InBev merger. Brewers are merging together has caused the same with the wholesale tier. There's less and less beer wholesalers, less and less choices. So, your friend that you developed a partnership with selling your beer, all of a sudden now is like he wants to cash in his chips and sell to the big conglomerate wholesaler. And now you are kind of freaking out saying, oh my gosh, is this person going to pay attention to me? At that moment in time, you can't always negotiate a new distribution agreement because the one that you signed might say that, hey, you've got no rights in an assignment, you have to approve me. Or you might be in a state that almost says that. Or, you have to approve it if they meet material qualifications. Well, the small independent wholesaler standards were probably a lot less than the huge conglomerate. That huge conglomerate is always going to meet qualifications. So when you're first appointing a territory is the time to negotiate the distribution agreement. Now, the flip is we have almost 8,000 plus breweries in the United States. 20 years ago, beer wholesalers would go knocking on a new brewery's door saying, please, 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 I like what you're doing. Can I sell your beer? Nowadays, the brewers are the ones having to solicit the wholesalers like, please, 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 will you take my beer? And, wholesalers don't want to deal what's referred to as the long tail of craft. If a beer wholesaler is selling 5 million cases and they're selling 4.5 million cases of that with their top 10 suppliers, they don't want other 100 beer suppliers to make up the other 500,000. It's not worth it to them. So you have to run your business the right way. You have to create fanciful labels and make good liquid. And you want to start off your distribution local at first. But if you get to the point where you're getting in the distributor agreement game, pay close attention to it. Really important. You could give away your self-distribution rights and you didn't even know it. Dealing with that situation where it's a wholesale-to-wholesale transaction, you could have rights to move and pay to get out at that time. When you talk about the beer franchise laws, they're written in state codes. They can have a lot of ambiguity in them. And it's that ambiguity that presents opportunity for certainly folks like me who have taken advantage of a lot of that ambiguity and put in terms and distributor agreements that, quite frankly, have made my clients a lot of money in certain situations and protected them and given them rights that they didn't think they had in the face of onerous beer franchise laws. A beer wholesaler will puff out their chest and say, you can't terminate me without good cause. They literally mean that they think that you cannot terminate them. Well, you can terminate them, and you don't have to have good cause, but it's going to create one of two things, right? One, if state law permits and the numbers are right, they could get an injunction against you and actually force you to continue to distribute them, so you effectively haven't terminated them. But a lot of times these are damage cases where they say, well, yeah, you wrongfully terminated them under the state code, so now you owe them 3, 4, 5, 6 times gross profit. Go listen to my distribution rights episode and you'll see what that means as far as factors go. But that's what they're going to argue, and it's going to be real expensive. Well, there might be ways in the agreement that you control those types of situations. Beer hasn't done as good job as wine in making its way across the United States into direct-to-consumer transactions. But, I think we're up to like 13, 14 states as opposed to wine's 46 states. But, it's important to be able to protect those types of transactions if a state changes its law. You want to hold them to performance standards. Hey, you make certain brands of beer that have short shelf lives and need to be refrigerated. You can put that in the agreement. There's all sorts of performance standards, marketing standards. And if you have the right type of brand, and I've done this, sometimes it's not the best thing. You have to be very careful in how you do it because you might just wind up making your beer almost unattainable in the marketplace for the consumer because it's overpriced. I've dealt with situations in selling distribution rights. Just like the wholesaler sells it to that little wholesaler, has sold it now to the big conglomerate wholesaler, and that there's a factor there that is the value to those beer rights. I've done those sales where before there's been one can of beer sold in the territory that's being appointed to the wholesaler where we've come up with a price for them to obtain the distribution rights. There's all sorts of things that could be at play in a distributor agreement. Any brewery signing any distributor agreement needs to understand what rights they could potentially have, and don't be scared to try and negotiate favorable terms. This has been a Norris McLaughlin Top Shelf Legal limited podcast series where we run through the topics of beers, distilleries, breweries, and spirits. I want to thank you, the listener, for being a part of the conversation. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. If you would like to learn more about our work, be sure to check out my legal liquor blog or email me at topshelflegal@norris-law.com. That's topshelflegal@norris-law.com.